At the time of the incident, I was racing in the NASCAR weekly racing series at the Stockton 99 Speedway in Stockton, California. I was watching the race from the pit observation area. I was standing near the fence, just a few feet from the track wall in turns 3 and 4. Then I turned and went to get my car ready to move onto the track. The next thing I remember was everything went white, like a thick fog during the day. I remember looking down from on top of the scoreboard, near where I was standing. I could see everything. I saw where the car came off the track and hit the fence. The car continued to run along the fence, knocking over the fence post and the unfortunate people standing near the fence. The car eventually came to a rest on its roof, at the beginning of the front stretch. The car struck me, throwing me about 50 feet, according to my ex-wife who was walking towards me when I was hit. 50 people were injured, and 1 died at the scene, so it was chaos for those trying to help the injured. I landed in front of a team's pit. They started CPR, but I was still not responding. They stopped working on me so they could help others. A friend told me he saw me lying there and went to my side. He was smacking me and calling my name. After my OBE, it was like a normal Sunday morning after a Saturday night of racing. I was home in bed. My children jumped into bed with my wife and me. We were laughing and having a good time. Then I start to hear my friend calling my name. I looked at my wife and said, "I wonder what Bob is doing here." She said, "You should probably go see what he wants." I got out of bed, standing there looking at my family. I said, "No, I don't want to leave you guys." She said, "You have to go. You need to hurry back." I turned to go, and our bedroom had a long hallway to the bedroom door. The hallway was super bright like the sun, so bright it was almost blinding. Again, I looked back and said, "I don't want to go." I felt like a child was holding my hand and almost pulling me down the hallway. When I got to the door, it was complete darkness on the other side of the door. I stood there and remembered not wanting to go into the darkness. Whatever was with me helped me go through. I remember gasping for air, and my friend Bob sitting next to me saying, "I thought you were dead." I was one of the last of the injured to leave the scene that night because they didn't think I would make it to the hospital. They even had a Medi-Flight helicopter come, and it didn't take me. That night, I had several internal injuries, and the doctors told my wife that I had about a 10% chance of surviving surgery. If I made it out of surgery, I had an even less chance of making it until morning. I was in the hospital for several weeks. I began having strange nightmares for several weeks almost every night. A few years before this experience happened to me, I lost a friend to an accident that happened at work. My nightmares started with my friend Ed, who recently passed. He started coming to me in my dreams, telling me that I was supposed to be with him because I wasn't supposed to live from the accident. It would get intense and end up with Ed chasing me. Eventually it stopped being Ed, and it was a dark figure with no features that would chase me. This went on for a while. I honestly thought I was going crazy. That's my story. I relive it every September 18th. This story was shared by Steve H. and happened in 1993.
Story 2. During this experience, my perception of reality was completely different from what was actually happening. I felt as though I had left my physical body and was observing myself, Sharon, from a different perspective. Instead of seeing myself lying by the pool, I saw myself lying in my bed at home. I was floating near the ceiling in a specific corner of my bedroom, dressed in a flowing white gown. To my right, there were 2 other beings floating near the ceiling, also dressed in white gowns. Although I didn't directly look at their faces, I caught a glimpse of them out of the corner of my eye. One of them appeared to be Jesus, but the second person was partially obscured by the first. In this experience, I was focused on Sharon, who was lying in bed. Her room had yellow walls and a white bedspread with yellow dot-like flowers, similar to my own bedroom. As I observed Sharon, it seemed like she was in a deep sleep or having a dream that she couldn't wake up from. It was as if her eyes were sealed shut, like when children have crusty stuff in their eyes in the morning. Despite her efforts to wake up, she remained calm, and there was no sense of panic or fear. Everything felt very peaceful and serene. Next to me, there were 2 figures floating in white. They didn't say anything, but I could feel a strong sense of love, comfort, and support emanating from them. It was as if they were there to guide me. Together, we continued to watch over Sharon as a bright stream of sunlight started to pour in through the bedroom window, signaling the break of dawn. We remained suspended in the air, observing Sharon as she calmly opened her eyes. At that exact moment, I returned to my own body and regained consciousness. During that moment, I found myself lying on the pool deck with my coach by my side. Despite feeling physically fine, I sensed that something extraordinary had just occurred. The memory of the experience remained vivid in my mind. Although I was initially confused about why I was lying there, it was an incredibly strange sensation, and I struggled to comprehend the events that had transpired. A few days later, I confided in one of my friends who had been present when I drowned. She recounted the chaos that had unfolded at the pool, while I had been enveloped in a state of peace and tranquility. What struck me as particularly peculiar was her revelation that my eyes had remained open throughout the entire time I was unconscious, even as I described floating above Sharon, who was having a dream. I never broached the subject with her again, and it wasn't until a couple of years later that I finally shared the experience with my parents. I was unaware that individuals who have had near-death experiences, NDE, often experience heightened intuition. In my case, this intuition manifested in small ways. On multiple occasions, I found myself bringing flowers to individuals whom I barely knew, simply because I felt they could use some cheering up. Surprisingly, it turned out that I had delivered the flowers to these individuals on their actual birthdays. I didn't have enough knowledge about them to know when their birthdays were, but I felt compelled to do it at that specific time. This story was shared by Sharon T. and happened in 1972.
Story 3. On 2 previous occasions, the employee who served me coffee mistakenly gave me regular coffee instead of the decaffeinated version. Unfortunately, regular coffee has negative effects on my cardiovascular system, causing cardiac arrhythmia and high blood pressure. During previous episodes, I experienced mild arrhythmia and an increase in blood pressure, which were noticeable but not severe. However, this time was different. As soon as I felt my heart beating irregularly, I lost touch with reality and immediately entered a different realm. I found myself in a brightly lit space with no discernible boundaries. Directly in front and above me, there was a structure that I struggled to describe, but it didn't captivate my attention. Somehow, I knew what it represented. I recall this structure as a hazy cloud that seemed like an entry point into something. Apart from this structure, there was nothing else in this space, no objects or people. In that moment, I experienced a profound sense of peace and contentment. All worries, pain, and anxiety seemed to vanish, leaving me in a state of complete clarity and comfort. Strangely, I had no recollection of my past life or any familiar faces. It was as if my memory had been wiped clean. Despite knowing that I was on the brink of death, I felt a sense of acceptance and tranquility. However, just as I was ready to embrace the end, a vivid image of my 1.5-year-old granddaughter appeared before me. In that instant, I realized that I still had a purpose to fulfill in this world, to be there for her. With this newfound determination, I was abruptly transported back to the conference room, fully aware of my surroundings and the presence of others. After requesting assistance from the person seated in front of me, they promptly called for an ambulance as I had requested. However, by the time the paramedics arrived, I was already beginning to feel much better. The paramedics assessed my condition and determined that my blood pressure was higher than usual, normally around 130, but it was measured at 170, and my heart rate was elevated, normally around 70, but it was over 100. Despite these symptoms, they decided that hospitalization was not necessary. After waiting for a short period of time, I decided to make my own way back home. Here are a few points I would like to mention. During my experience in that other reality, I was unable to see my physical body. I was simply a conscious entity. All of the events I described above seemed to occur simultaneously, except for the moment when my granddaughter's image appeared, which ended the experience. In regular time, the entire event could have lasted for minutes or even hours. This story was shared by Manuel M. and happened in 2016.